How's it going, everybody? My name is Spencer, aka Agent Mulder, and welcome to the War Room. Today we'll be going over Gears Tactics. In this action-packed turn-based shooter, I'll be going over how best to position your soldiers and how Overwatch works, how to deal with emergence holes, and how enemies react when they come out of them, how cooldown and finishing moves work, and finally taking a quick glimpse at the skill tree so far when you first start off in the game. All that and more straight ahead. Don't forget, if you enjoyed this video and the channel, feel free to subscribe, and to click the little bell icon below to be notified of new content every week. Without further ado, let's get started. Let's talk about positioning your soldiers and Overwatch. If you're new to turn-based tactical games, the idea of this game is to best position your soldiers to where they have a quick advantage over your opponents. The best areas to position your soldiers are on high vantage points, which not only give them better accuracy when using their weapons, but also allows you to throw your grenades in more accurate spots to where enemies would be difficult to hit if you're on equal ground with them. In this game, each character has 3 actions. Everything you do from moving, throwing grenades, and firing your weapon counts as one action. Because of how aggressive the enemies are and how they outnumber your forces in every single match so far, my best piece of advice is to keep your 4 soldiers within same proximity of each other, with only about 1 or 2 actions away from running to each other when assisting or trying to revive one another. Do your very best to keep your soldiers within a safe distance from emergence holes. When enemies come out of them, immediately take their turn when they show up. So if you have soldiers who are surrounding the emergency hole, say if they have Overwatch, or if you're out of turns and they're just sitting there, they're much more highly risk of getting killed, especially when enemies have 3 hole actions, the same as your characters when they come out of the hole. Speaking of Overwatch, let's talk about that real quick. How Overwatch works is that at any given time during your character's turn, and using one of their actions, you can set up your character to guard a certain specific area that they're looking over on the map. When you activate Overwatch, a long cone will show up in front of your character. Any enemies that walk within this cone's range will immediately be attacked by your character. Depending upon how many actions they have left, say for example if you activate Overwatch as their first action, the remaining 2 actions your character have will be used to firing their weapon on opponents running into their line of sight. This is especially a lifesaver when you're surrounded or have multiple enemy wretches charging at you at once. One thing to keep in mind about Overwatch is that when you deploy the cone, is that the longer you stretch out the cone, the less accurate your soldier is going to be when enemies run into his or her line of sight. So if you have multiple actions to spare, it is best to use the longer version of the cone, that way your soldier can make up for any lost shots with their extra action. But if you say, for example, you spend an action trying to move your character into position, it is better to have a shortened cone so that their final action will be used for a more accurate shot. The longer the cone, the less accurate you'll be. The shorter the cone, the more accurate you're going to be. I would even go so far as to use one of your soldiers as bait to lure your enemies towards them, while the rest of your soldiers use a longer range of Overwatch to chop them down as they try to rush your ally. Each grenade that you have, or a special ability your character possesses, has a cooldown attached to it. These abilities at times can take up between 1 to 6 turns to cool down if not used appropriately. For example, the stem grenades, which can be used to revive downed allies, takes about a total of 6 turns to cool down before you can use it again. I recommend saving your grenades for emergency holes when they show up, or when groups of wretches show up because they'll be bunched together the first couple of turns they show up on the field. Make a quick dash with an extra soldier backing up your Gears trooper that's making a run to throw the grenade. This is very important, especially towards wretches, because once they first drop into the field, they'll stay bunched up together for the first 2 turns. But after those first 2 turns, the wretches will begin to spread out, which will make it a little bit more difficult to take them down. Another important thing about action points is your finishing moves. During certain engagements, enemies once taken enough damage will be vulnerable to finishing moves. These classic Gears finishing moves, either stomping on an enemy's head and watching it blow up, chainsawing them to death, or snapping their neck, will immediately grant all your soldiers an extra action point, be it to either stack on a soldier who hasn't used any of their action points, or to give back an action point on a character who's already used up all of theirs. This is incredibly important to keep in mind, especially when you're surrounded by multiple foes, and say you need to get an ally out of danger, set up Overwatch, or need to use that extra action point to throw a grenade to give your team some cover. Be smart on how you use your finishing moves though. Simply running your ally towards a downed enemy when there's other enemies in sight can lead them to danger. I've noticed especially grenadier enemies will use 2 of their action points simply to rush your opponent to run as fast as they can from one edge of the map to the other, and use their final action point to do serious damage with a shotgun up close. Another thing to keep in mind about grenadier enemies, or any enemy for example who carries a shotgun, is if you try to rush at them and they're not in that finishing move state, they will automatically use their shotgun to shoot you, even if it's on your turn. So keep your distance when up against grenadiers. And finally, let's talk about the skill tree. Now, so far I've discovered that there are 4 specializations per character, depending upon what field of expertise they thrive in. For example, your more long-range shooters, such as snipers, will have abilities such as marksman, assassin. Each one of these 4 specializations has their own skill tree. Now, for what I've researched so far, you won't be able to fill out an entire skill tree for a character, but you can mix and match different skills from different specializations. So I highly recommend that instead of focusing on, say, if you're playing as a marksman, you want to focus on being an assassin, try to mix and match your abilities. Focus on stealth while also increasing your accuracy, or focus on giving yourself a shorter cooldown if you like running and gunning and using grenades, and adding a little extra armor to those particular type of characters. So far I've been trying to balance out my skill tree at the early parts of the game. I'll definitely have a more in-depth skill tree to show you in my next tips and tricks video part 2. One final thing I will say is keep your eyes open for loot chests. These loot chests can contain common to rare items that you can equip to your characters, such as scopes for your riflemen, better barrels for your guns, and extra armor pieces as well. You will find these chests mostly on the outskirts of maps. If you're feeling daring, take a team of 2 and go off the beaten trail really quickly to go see if you can find some of those chests. And that's all I have so far on our Gears Tactics Tips and Tricks video part 1. And if you discovered some unique encounters on your first few missions in Gears Tactics, leave a comment below. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, feel free to like, share, and subscribe for a lot more. I'll be doing a series of tips and tricks videos on Gears Tactics, along with a special feature video rounding up how I feel about this game after beating it, both this week and next week. So be sure to stick around when those new videos drop very soon. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you all next time.
That's what I'm afraid of. Up ahead.
Hey, over here!
Okay, cupcakes, listen up.